The food wrapper was sharper than it looked. Blossom hissed through her teeth as the edge sliced across her index finger. A thin line of red appeared instantly. She stuck the finger in her mouth without thinking, the metallic taste familiar and annoying. Just another small injury in a long list of human clumsiness. She grabbed a napkin from the dispenser and wrapped it around the cut. That was when everything stopped. The cafeteria went silent. Not the comfortable quiet of people eating, but the heavy, suffocating silence of prey animals sensing a predator. Blossom looked up from her bleeding finger to find 38 pairs of alien eyes staring at her. Nobody was chewing. Nobody was moving. The three cubs sitting near Ambassador Mimi's table were completely frozen. Their bodies had gone rigid. Their multiple eyes dilated so wide they looked like black marbles pressed into furry faces. Their ears, which had been twitching and rotating constantly since Blossom entered the cafeteria, were now flat against their skulls. One of them, the smallest with the silver stripe down its back, was trembling. Blossom said, looking at her wrapped finger, "It's just a cut." The middle cub, the one with amber spots, made a sound. It was barely a whisper, filtered through the universal translator clipped to its collar, but every being in the room heard it. "That's Apex." The reaction was immediate and completely insane. Mimi stood so fast her chair clattered backward. Chalu, the security commander who had been standing by the entrance looking bored, suddenly had both hands on his weapon. The other delegates started backing away from the human section of the cafeteria, their movements careful and deliberate, like they were trying not to trigger something. "What's happening?" Bronwyn asked from across the table, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "I don't know," Blossom said slowly, "but everyone's looking at me like I grew a second head." Orson, who had been arguing with Atlas about the quality of the station's fruit selection, turned to look at the crowd. "Why does everyone look terrified?" "Security Protocol 16, Mimi's voice cut through the silence, sharp and commanding. "Seal the cafeteria. Nobody enters or leaves until Medical Officer Zaka arrives." "What?" Blossom stood up, still holding the napkin to her finger. "It's just a paper cut, I'm fine." The cubs whimpered in unison. Chalu moved toward the humans, his weapon now drawn but pointed at the floor. "Please remain where you are. Do not make sudden movements." "You're pointing a gun at us because she cut her finger." Atlas's voice rose with disbelief. "Are you all insane?" "The cubs detected it," Mimi said, her voice tight. She was staring at her cubs who had not moved from their frozen positions. "They've never done that before. Never." "Detected what?" Blossom asked, frustration creeping into her tone. "Apex scent," the smallest cub whispered again. Its eyes were still locked on Blossom's hand. "Blood of Apex, superior threat." The cafeteria doors burst open and Zaka rushed in, carrying a portable medical scanner and looking like she had run the entire way from the medical bay. She stopped when she saw the cubs, her expression shifting from concern to something like awe. "They actually froze," she breathed. "I didn't think it was possible." "Will someone please explain what's going on?" Bronwyn's voice had an edge to it now. Zaka approached slowly, keeping her eyes on the cubs rather than the humans. "Ambassador Mimi's cubs are apex predators from Zor Prime. On their world, they sit at the top of the food chain. Nothing hunts them. Nothing frightens them. They're biologically incapable of submission responses." "Okay," Blossom said carefully. "And they just froze at the scent of your blood," Zaka said, finally turning to look at Blossom. "They detected something in your biology that triggered a response we didn't know they had. May I scan you?" Blossom held out her hand, the napkin now spotted with red. Zaka ran the scanner over her finger, then her arm, then her entire body. The device made a series of beeps that seemed to distress Mimi even more. "This can't be right," Zaka muttered, checking the scanner's display 3 times. "What can't be right?" Orson asked. Zaka looked up at the 4 humans, her expression somewhere between fascination and horror. Your blood chemistry contains 13 separate markers that register as apex-class predator indicators. Your pheromone signature rates at level 9 on the threat assessment scale. Level 9. We've only ever recorded level 8 in laboratory conditions with synthesized compounds. In simple words, please, Atlas said. You smell like something that eats other predators, Chelou said flatly. The cubs are young. They're still learning the hierarchy. They've never encountered something above them before. Blossom looked at her bleeding finger, then at the cubs, then back at her finger. But I'm just a human. We eat vegetables and grain and sometimes meat. We're not that scary. The smallest cub made a sound that the translator rendered as distressed chittering. They disagree, Mimi said quietly. She moved toward her cub slowly and placed a hand on the smallest one's head. It didn't move. It didn't even seem to register her touch. Its eyes were still fixed on Blossom. In 30 cycles of raising cubs, I've never seen them react this way. They're trained diplomat companions. They meet dangerous species regularly. Maybe the scanner's broken, Bronwyn suggested. Zaka shook her head. I ran full diagnostics this morning. The scanner is accurate. She looked at Blossom again, her head tilting in that way some species did when they were thinking. Have you noticed any unusual reactions from other species since arriving at the station? Blossom thought about it. Some people keep their distance. I thought they were just not friendly. Or they were maintaining safe distance from a perceived threat, Chelou said. He had not lowered his weapon. This is ridiculous, Orson said, standing up. We've been in the galaxy for 8 cycles now. If we were dangerous, someone would have noticed. Perhaps they did notice. Leby, the diplomatic envoy, spoke for the first time. He had been sitting at a corner table, watching everything unfold. Perhaps they simply chose not to mention it. It's considered extremely rude to inform a species that they make others uncomfortable. How uncomfortable? Atlas asked. Leby stood and approached the human table, though he stopped several paces away. There are 83 known species in the Galactic Council. Of those, 61 have some form of biological threat response to predator markers. The response ranges from mild unease to complete paralysis. He gestured at the cubs. They're experiencing the latter. Because of a paper cut, Blossom said, staring at the 3 frozen cubs. Because of what the paper cut revealed, Mimi corrected. She was stroking her cubs' fur now, trying to comfort them, but they remained locked in place. Apex predators don't bleed casually. They don't bleed in public spaces. They don't bleed and then ignore it like it means nothing. Her voice rose slightly. Your species walks around with wounds and treats them as minor inconveniences. Do you understand how terrifying that is? The humans looked at each other. Not really, Bronwyn admitted. The middle cub, the one with amber spots, finally moved. It was the smallest movement, just a slight turn of its head toward Blossom. When it spoke, its voice was soft but clear. She's not afraid of her own blood. She's not afraid of us. She's not afraid of anything. I'm afraid of plenty of things, Blossom protested. The cub's eyes narrowed. Then why do you smell like victory? Nobody had an answer for that. Zaka's scanner beeped again, and she looked at the display with growing concern. We need to call an emergency council meeting. This changes everything about human classification. What does that mean? Orson asked. Chelou finally lowered his weapon. It means we've been treating your species as harmless visitors. We may need to reclassify you as predator-class hazards. Because of a paper cut, Blossom repeated, still not quite believing any of this. The smallest cub whimpered again, and this time the translator picked up the full phrase. Not because of the cut, because you don't care about the cut. And somehow, that was the most terrifying thing anyone had said all day. The emergency council meeting lasted 6 hours, and by the end of it, Blossom had developed a headache from all the shouting. Most of it wasn't even directed at her. The various species representatives were too busy arguing with each other about threat classifications and biological hierarchies, and whether humans should be allowed in civilian areas at all. What made everything worse was that the cubs wouldn't stop following her. They maintained exactly 3 meters of distance, their eyes tracking her every movement. When she walked to get water, they walked. When she sat down, they sat. When she shifted in her chair, all 3 sets of ears swiveled toward her in perfect synchronization. "This is deeply unsettling," Bronwyn whispered to Blossom during a particularly heated exchange between Pafa and Chelou. "You're telling me," Blossom muttered back. "I feel like I'm being hunted by very polite predators." "You're not being hunted," Mimi said sharply from across the table. She had clearly overheard them. "You're being analyzed. They're trying to understand you." "By staring at me for 6 hours." "Yes." Mimi looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes and her fur had lost some of its usual gleam. "They're young. Their instincts are still forming. You've confused every biological imperative they possess." Really, the biological researcher who had been running tests since the cafeteria incident cleared his throat. "If I may present my findings." The arguing stopped. Every eye in the council chamber turned toward him. Really activated a holographic display that showed a complex molecular structure rotating slowly in the air. "I've analyzed samples from all 4 humans present on the station. The results are consistent across all subjects." He manipulated the display, highlighting certain compounds in red. "Human blood chemistry contains markers that trigger submission responses in approximately 61 known species. These markers include elevated levels of adrenaline metabolites, specific pheromone compounds, and a unique protein structure we've never encountered before." "What does that mean in normal words?" Orson asked. "It means your species is terrifying on a molecular level," Really said simply. "To any species with predator awareness instincts, you register as super predators, beings that hunt other hunters." Atlas laughed. It was sharp and sudden in the quiet chamber. "That's absurd. Humans aren't super predators." "Tell that to your evolutionary history," Lebby said, pulling up another display. This one showed a timeline of human development. "You domesticated wolves. You turned apex predators into pets. You did this approximately 15,000 cycles ago, which means your species was confident enough to befriend dangerous predators when you still lived in caves." The cubs made a collective sound of distress. "You also," Lebby continued, "hunt for sport. You climb to the tops of mountains for recreation. You willingly swim in waters containing predators. Your young participate in activities specifically designed to simulate danger." He paused. "You call this fun?" "Okay, when you list it like that, we sound unhinged," Bronwyn admitted. "You are unhinged," Pafa said. The trade minister had been quiet until now, but her voice carried real fear. "I've reviewed the reports from human territory. You keep predators in your homes. You name them. You let them sleep near your offspring." She stood up, her hands trembling slightly. "What kind of apex predator shares territory with other apex predators?" "Dogs aren't apex predators anymore," Blossom protested. "We bred them to be friendly." "You what?" Mimi's voice cracked like a whip through the chamber. "We selectively bred them over thousands of cycles to enhance traits we liked," Atlas explained. "Loyalty, protectiveness, the ability to follow commands." The smallest cub stood up on shaky legs and backed away from Blossom until it hit the wall. "You genetically modified predators to serve you," Zaka said slowly, like she was testing the words. "You altered their biology to make them dependent on you. You created an entire subspecies that views you as pack leaders." "I mean, we also made them cute," Orson offered. "That was important too." Kabu, the station administrator, who had been silent through most of the meeting, made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "I'm filling out evacuation protocols. I'm actually filling out evacuation protocols because a species thought it would be fun to modify predators." It wasn't for fun, Blossom said defensively. It was for hunting and protection and companionship. You needed protection from what? Chelou asked. The humans looked at each other. Other humans mostly, Bronwyn said. The silence that followed was profound and deeply uncomfortable. Really manipulated the holographic display again, this time showing genetic markers. This explains the protein structure I mentioned earlier. Your species evolved under constant predation pressure, but not from other species, from each other. Your apex predators that developed pack hunting tactics to compete with other human packs. That's the most disturbing thing I've heard all cycle, Pafa said quietly. It gets worse, Really continued. I compared human biology to the cub's biology. Apex predators typically have decreased social bonding capabilities. It's a survival mechanism. Competition between predators is dangerous. So most apex species are solitary. He highlighted a section of the genetic code. Humans have the opposite. You have enhanced social bonding mechanisms. You form complex hierarchies, cooperate in large groups, and willingly sacrifice individual advantage for group benefit. Why is that bad? Atlas asked. Because it should be impossible, Mimi said. She was staring at the display like it had personally offended her. Apex predators don't cooperate. Cooperation requires suppressing hunting instincts, suppressing territorial behavior, suppressing the drive to dominate. Your species didn't suppress those instincts. You just added cooperation on top of them. The middle cub, the one with amber spots, spoke for the first time since entering the council chamber. They hunt in packs. They modify other predators. They make weapons. They cooperate. It looked at Blossom with something that might have been awe or terror or both. How did your species not destroy itself? We tried, Orson said. Several times. We got pretty close a few times, actually. This is not helping, Bronwyn hissed at him. Chelou stood up, his expression grim. I'm recommending immediate restrictions. Humans should be confined to designated areas. No access to public spaces without escort. No contact with juvenile members of other species. You can't be serious, Blossom said. Your presence causes biological distress in over half the species on this station, Chelou said. The cubs are proof. They're trained diplomat companions. They meet dangerous species every cycle. They've never frozen before. Never. They're not frozen now, Atlas pointed out. Everyone looked at the cubs. He was right. They were no longer locked in place. They were standing, alert and watchful, their eyes fixed on Blossom. That's worse, Mimi said quietly. When they freeze, it's fear. When they watch like that, it's learning. Learning what? Blossom asked. The smallest cub tilted its head. Learning to be apex like you. The words hung in the air like a threat. Kabu stood up so fast his chair toppled over. Absolutely not. No. I'm invoking Station Regulation 512. Humans are now classified as Category 9 biological hazards. Restricted movement, mandatory escorts. No exceptions. You're overreacting, Bronwyn said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Kabu pulled up a new display showing the cubs' biometric data. In the past 6 hours, their cortisol levels have dropped by 30%. Their aggressive response markers have increased by 45%. Their social bonding indicators are spiking every time Blossom moves. He looked at Mimi. Your cubs are imprinting on her. Mimi closed her eyes. No. What does that mean? Blossom asked. Zaka answered, her voice clinical and detached. Young apex predators instinctively seek stronger predators to learn from. It's a survival mechanism. They observe, they mimic, they adapt. If they can't find a stronger predator of their own species, they'll seek out any apex predator available. She looked at Blossom. They think you're their teacher now. But I'm not an apex predator, Blossom said desperately. The cubs moved closer, still maintaining distance, but closer than before. The middle cub spoke again, its voice carrying a strange certainty. Yes, you are. You bleed and don't care. You face stronger beings without fear. You cooperate with your pack while maintaining dominance. It paused. You are what we need to become. This is a diplomatic catastrophe, Lebby said, rubbing his face with both hands. If the Cubs reject Mimi's authority in favor of a human, it will destroy 30 cycles of diplomatic relations with Zor Prime. Then Blossom needs to reject them, Pafa said. She needs to refuse the imprinting. How? Blossom asked. By following proper predator hierarchy protocols, Really said. He pulled up a new document on the display. You must demonstrate that you're not a suitable pack leader. You must show weakness, submission, fear. You must convince them that you're not what they think you are. Blossom looked at the 3 cubs staring at her with wide, intelligent eyes. And if I can't? Nobody answered. They didn't need to. The implication hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. If she couldn't convince the cubs she wasn't an apex predator, then maybe she really was one. The rejection ritual was supposed to be simple. Blossom just needed to act scared. She tried whimpering. The cubs leaned forward with interest, their ears perking up like they were watching a fascinating performance. She tried backing away slowly. The cubs interpreted this as tactical repositioning and nodded approvingly. She tried making herself smaller by crouching down. The smallest cub whispered that she was demonstrating energy conservation, a key predator skill. This isn't working, Bronwyn said from her position near the door. The humans had been given one of the station's conference rooms to attempt the rejection ritual. Mimi and Zaka were observing through a transparent wall, their expressions ranging from hopeful to resigned. Maybe I should try crying, Blossom suggested. Humans cry when upset, Orson pointed out. But we also cry when happy or angry or watching emotional entertainment. The cubs will just think you have leaky eyes. Atlas was packing back and forth, which made the cub's head swivel to track his movement. What if we show them humans eating plants? Predators don't eat vegetables. Worth trying, Blossom said. They brought in a selection of station vegetation. Blossom sat down in front of the cubs and very deliberately ate a piece of leafy something that tasted like sadness and grass. She chewed thoroughly, making sure the cubs could see. The cubs exchanged glances. The middle cub spoke first. Apex predator that can survive on any food source, more dangerous, more adaptable. No, Blossom said through a mouthful of terrible vegetable. It means I'm not a predator. Predators eat meat. Predators eat what keeps them alive, the smallest cub corrected. You choose to eat plants. Choice means power. Blossom looked at Bronwyn helplessly. I'm making it worse. Maybe we show them human history, Atlas suggested. Show them we're not always dominant. Really entered the room carrying a data pad. I brought historical records. Perhaps if the cubs see human vulnerability, they'll understand. He projected images into the air. Humans throughout history, struggling, failing, dying. Natural disasters, diseases, wars. The cubs watched with rapt attention. Your species faced extinction multiple times, the amber-spotted cub observed. But you survived. Every time you adapted. Every time you became stronger. That's not the point, Blossom said, frustration creeping into her voice. That's exactly the point, the cub replied. You don't give up, even when you should. Even when any other species would accept death, you fight. Its eyes gleamed. That's why you're apex. Outside the room, Mimi placed her head in her hands. Zaka tried a different approach. She entered the room with her scanner and showed the cubs detailed biological data. Look at their physical capabilities. Humans aren't particularly strong compared to other species. They're not especially fast. Their natural weapons are minimal. The cubs studied the data carefully. They have no claws, the smallest cub noted. No fangs, no armor, no venom. Exactly, Zaka said, relief flooding her voice. They're vulnerable. So they built weapons, the amber-spotted cub finished. They made themselves apex through intelligence, through cooperation, through refusing to accept their limitations. It looked at Blossom with something approaching reverence. They're more apex than us. We were born into dominance. They chose it. Zaka left the room without another word. Orson tried teaching the cubs a human game involving cooperation and strategy. The cubs excelled at it immediately, working together in ways that Mimi later said should have taken cycles to learn. Atlas tried showing them entertainment videos of humans being silly and non-threatening. The cubs found the physical comedy particularly instructive, noting how humans used humor to diffuse tension and strengthen pack bonds. Everything the humans did to seem less dangerous only made them more impressive. Bronwyn finally sat down next to Blossom, exhausted. "We can't win this. Everything about us screams predator to them." "Because we are predators," Blossom said quietly. She looked at the three cubs sitting patiently, waiting for their next lesson. "We just never thought of ourselves that way." The middle cub nodded. "That's what makes you perfect teachers. You don't think like predators, you think like something better." Through the transparent wall, Kabu was frantically updating station protocols. Chalu had his hand on his weapon again. Pafa was arguing with Lebi about galactic law. Mimi was staring at her cubs with an expression of profound loss. And the cubs were smiling, showing teeth that could tear through metal, looking at Blossom like she had just given them the universe. "We're in so much trouble," Atlas said. The smallest cub's translator caught one more phrase before the session ended. "Not trouble, evolution." Blossom stopped fighting it on the third attempt to reject the cubs. If they wanted to learn from her, fine. She would teach them something useful. She gathered the cubs in the center of the room and introduced them to a human concept: teamwork without competition. The cubs struggled with it initially, their instincts screaming to dominate each other. But they watched Blossom, Bronwyn, Orson, and Atlas work together on a simple puzzle, and something clicked. The smallest cub helped the amber-spotted one reach a high piece. The middle cub shared information instead of hoarding it. They completed the puzzle together, and for the first time since the incident, they looked genuinely happy. Mimi watched through the wall, her expression unreadable. Really approached the glass with fresh analysis. Humans aren't just apex predators, you're social apex predators, pack hunters with tool use and abstract reasoning. You weaponize cooperation itself. "Is that bad?" Atlas asked. "It explains why you conquered your entire planet," Really said quietly. The cubs approached Blossom together, moving in perfect synchronization. Through the translator, they made their request formal. "Teach us to be apex together, like you." Mimi entered the room, her movements slow and deliberate. She couldn't refuse without dishonoring her cubs. Cultural law bound her. "The Zoran government will protest this," she said. "Let them," Blossom said. She looked at the three young predators who had chosen her as their guide. "I'll teach them cooperation, strategy, problem-solving. Nothing dangerous." "Everything you teach them will be dangerous," Chalu said over the intercom. "That's the problem." Kabu's voice crackled through. "Humans are now restricted from 32 station sections. Congratulations." Bronwyn grinned. "Do we get diplomatic immunity now?" The smallest cub approached Blossom and placed something at her feet. Another dead maintenance drone, but this time it was carefully wrapped with wire twisted into a decorative pattern. The cub had tried to make it beautiful. "They're learning aesthetics," Orson whispered. "Oh no." The amber-spotted cub sat down and looked up at Blossom with bright, eager eyes. "What is lesson 2? Through the transparent wall, Mimi closed her eyes and wondered what her species had just helped unleash on the galaxy. The other council members were already filing reports, updating threat assessments, and questioning every assumption they had ever made about hierarchy and dominance. Blossom smiled and patted the middle cub on the head. Its purr rattled the furniture. Somewhere in the station, Alarms were going off for reasons nobody could quite explain. The cubs sat in perfect formation, tails wrapped around each other in a gesture of unity they had never shown before, and waited. "All right," Blossom said. "Lesson 2 is about trust." The cubs leaned forward as one, and the galaxy held its breath.